Hey everyone, welcome to the Proxian feedback video. Before I really get into it, I want to quickly go over the stats for the campaign, what my Proxians did, and how I compared to World. I thought this might be like only the people on your difficulty when I played it on Legend, but I think these are the same numbers, which is very confusing. Successful shot percentage 100%. That might be fucking telling about how this class plays. That every shot that wasn't an Overwatch in the entire campaign landed, apparently. I didn't realize that had happened. I thought I had taken some lower percent shots and missed them, but apparently I haven't. The only soldiers we lost were mechanical units we mind controlled. Obviously, we didn't lose either Proxian at any point in time. You notice we did it in about half the number of missions as the average in the world. Half the aliens killed. Of our 30 missions, 20 of them were flawless, which is a little bit nuts. Average turn on timers left is a little bit lower. That feels insane to me. I played the whole campaign almost with extra mission timers. And then I also just like steamrolled every mission super fast. Like, yeah, it was a two-man team, but I was like killing a pod plus per turn on average. You know what this tells me? This tells me that most people play with mods that make the mission timers longer. I don't know how to see the average in the world being 2 turns faster than me, other than most people play with mods that cause their turn timers to be longer. Because I had the 2-turn timer and I steamrolled every mission, and somehow I'm way below the average. Seems crazy to me. Anyway, killed all the Chosen, absolutely crushed the world rate, but again, it feels like it's the Legend number, so I don't quite know what's going on here. But killed my first Chosen crazy fast. Didn't get very many kills with faction heroes at all. Those were in covert ops where I was on ambush missions. Global ability points earned, that doesn't mean anything because of the average being so messed up. Covert actions completed, half the campaign, half the actions, makes sense. It makes sense, rather. No level 3 soldier bonds. I think I just forgot to get it, and I'm pretty sure I was high enough to do it. No breakthroughs. I'm surprised 19 soldiers sell action. I think that's counting every single thing I ever mind controlled, because I'm pretty sure it was like 5, maybe 7 if you count like some people I forgot in covert ops and ambushes. Days to first colonel, 51. Yeah, that's what happens when you have a unit that goes on every single mission and gets all the kills themselves. Total days wounded's pretty high, but also it didn't matter at all because like we would get chip wounded and then we'd just keep going on missions like nothing happened. Promotion to earned being even 1/3 of the average seems that's crazy to me considering how few units I was playing with. Number of colonels 4, which is very funny to me. No psi whatsoever. Very few hack rewards because there were very few missions. Didn't hack robots, although not for lack of trying. It just sort of is bugged right now and you don't roll to hack. Number of scientists and engineers, who cares? Days to mag weapons crush the average. This makes me very confident that most people who are playing these days are playing at Legends. Or I'm just very confused and don't understand. If anyone can tell me how these stats work, I'd be interested to hear it, because this feels so weird that I'm this far above the average for days to mag, and beam, and plate, all of it. I'm far, far above the average on all of these things. I don't know why everyone's building so many radio relays. That's confusing to me. Anyways, very, very strong campaign, absolutely crushed it. A quick check of lifetime stats. My average hit percent on a shot was 96.3%. I'm slightly lucky that checks out since it never missed. 116 shots, 113 hits. How on earth do I have no shots missed in the campaign then? Explain this to me. 185 kills, 2,000 damage dealt, 67 shred, 15 damage taken, 9 shredded, 28 absorbed, 7 mitigated by armor. That's really alarming. Those are like the full-length campaign Pioneer and Infiltrator numbers in an incredibly short campaign. And those are classes I decided were frankly overpowered, and by comparison to this, they are weak. I'm going to get into exactly where I think the problem stemmed from in a second. I just want to see the stats. 11 hit streak, best hit streak 56. That's honestly less good than I thought it would be, but I didn't think I even fired this many shots, to be honest. Oh, you know what it might be? Maybe it doesn't count it as a miss for the streak if it's like the second shot in a fanfire or something. Maybe that's how this is getting broken up and the stats thought it was 100%. Not really sure. Over here, we're looking pretty similar, moderately unlucky, but let's be real, it's basically dead on average. Very similar average hit. Much better best hit streak at 106. That's the highest I've had since I started recording for YouTube. Very similar number of kills, damage dealt, shredded. Not nearly as much tanking happening here, but that just feels like I played riskier with Alpha because they had more armor, making them the target more often. Just absolutely disgusting numbers getting put up by both of these legends. I think the first place to start is just the base stats. Let me get my notepad open because I have a notepad. And I think the real first place to start is what I like about Proxians, because if you watch this video series, I clearly had a really good time playing them. And that's not just because they're powerful, they are, but the aesthetic is really, really nice. They look very cool, they feel very aesthetically on point, everything about them functions really well. Their playstyle is really unique. The whole running in with Reckoning and that being a blue move, giving you really high mobility but only in a fight, that's fundamentally cool. Moving with Teleport is fundamentally cool. They play differently than any other unit, and it's a very fluid and fun way to play the game. The issue is the power level of the things you're doing after that fluid movement is happening. And part of that is I think that mobility is intended to be a weak stat for them. However, there are such strong ways to counter and negate that it's not a counterbalance at all. It's just manipulating the play pattern to move with Reckoning, to move with Teleport. That doesn't in any way make the character weakened by its mobility, it just changes the way it's played and forces it to play in this way. That's not a bad thing. It means that it encourages a really strong and interesting playstyle, but it's no longer limiting the strength of the character. And another thing that I absolutely love is Hyperdrive giving Wrecking Ball in addition to the normal Overdrive stuff. That's a really good way, especially in the early game when you can't really mitigate your mobility nearly as well. That's a great way to limit how bad the mobility is, because now you can run through walls. It's really, really useful for being able to move further while hyperdrived without directly giving mobility buffs. I think that's a really good decision. Now, I think the first two and possibly most major issues with Proxians have nothing to do with any of these abilities. Well, none of them in specific. The first one is these base stats. 95 aim and 18 health and a 2 base armor is a fucking shitload. The 230 hack might or might not... Okay, it's not supposed to be 230. Let's go to the guy who looks normal. The 170 hack might or might not be a problem. I don't remember what a specialist with a tier 3 gremlin looks like. If this is approximately the same number as that, then it's completely fine. And I think it is approximately the same number, so that's fine. However, the aim being this high, their guns kind of suck, so that's really not a problem. But the health and the armor is. It's not base 2 armor, it's base 1 armor, and then you get 1 armor from tier 1, 2 from tier 2, and 3 from tier 3. So a baseline Proxian has 2 armor, 1 from itself, 1 from its conventional gear. I think the baseline armor can be cut entirely. I think a major issue with the Proxians is that they clearly have a function where they're intended to be tanks for their team, right? They have sacrifice, they have this ability where instead of dying, they go into stasis and come back with health, giving them a chance to use this healing ability of theirs and stay in the fight. They have a clear intended tanking function. However, it has been my experience that they can just easily tank the whole game baseline. Sure, you start adding mod-added enemies in, there's 8 more guys every mission, all of them have shredding guns. Suddenly, the unit's in a lot more danger when it's trying to tank. However, I think the baseline, just like with Pioneers, is too high. Without the base armor pip, you would consistently be in a position where this unit's much more exposed to danger. I would like to see a tanking tree that actually meaningfully made them better at tanking. It's really just sacrifice right now. I would probably like to see something cut out and have Blast Patty become a core perk in the tank line. And that way, if someone's willing to invest the ability points or the perk into being a better tank, they are. But otherwise, they're less durable as a baseline. Because the baseline, as a baseline, right? How much tankiness do you get just as a baseline? You don't get energy shield boost, you don't get stasis, you don't get sacrifice. I didn't have this for most of the campaign. I never got the other two, right? They're basically as good of a tank as they'll ever be, just without spending anything. And I think that is a failure of identity for the tanking line, that you can fulfill the function without taking the perks. Additionally, their baseline durability is just insane. Like, regardless of whether or not there should be more tanking perks and less stuff like Hunter Protocol and less stuff like Shockwave that's in the tanking tree, or sorry, less stuff like Teleport that's in the tanking tree. The main issue is their baseline tankiness being this high not only invalidates the tanking tree, but makes every other tree just do that as well. I wasn't playing with other units. These were forced to tank the entire enemy team, not that they ever lived long enough to do anything. But theoretically, if you were playing with other units, this would be the safest, best dangle you could possibly have. It's nearly a Pioneer level tank on its own, right? It has 30 dodge compared to 40, it has 4 armor compared to 6, it has 26 health compared to I think around 18. So it's not really much worse than a Pioneer as a tank to begin with, and it's a much, much more dangerous offensive unit than a Pioneer is. So I do genuinely think that one of the biggest issues is the baseline stats. I think you could easily cut 2 health from every single rank. Not like total, but like 2 health is gone at the baseline and it's never recovered anywhere. Same with the base 1 armor. And I think it would still be an incredibly durable unit, and it would help to give you room to make a tanky perk like blast padding in the main tree without having it be potentially so much armor that the class starts genuinely breaking the game. And the fact that I think you could cut even like 4 health and no one would notice the difference says just how much extra health they have, right? There's not that much difference in 12 health and 8 health in the first mission. Like, the difference for that is I can solo a mission without worrying, or I need to actually care about this unit's health at all. But by the end of the game, the difference in 26 and 22 is like nothing. It doesn't matter. So I do think the health is just too high. I really strongly believe the first armor pip is too much. And as an extension of that, I would like to see a more dedicated tanking tree. The things that stand out to me the most as potentially not being relevant are Hunter Protocol is just a strong throughput ability the class really didn't need, right? Like, they were incredible before I got this. It's the only Overwatch ability they have at all. I think this isn't the only candidate in the whole tree where I look at this and think it's a good candidate for culling. That said, I also think that taking Teleport Shockwave, which has a longer cooldown, I assume, than Teleport, right? Yeah, 3-turn cooldown. I think you would almost never take this just because this is so valuable for moving while in stealth, and having the movement more often is more valuable. I don't necessarily think Teleport Shockwave should be removed. I'd like that it exists. But the only perk in the entire tree that I feel really easily could be cold is Hunter Protocol. With other perks where I didn't use them, or I used them and didn't think highly of them, I don't necessarily think they're easy targets to call. Except for Adaptive Aim. Adaptive Aim makes a ton of sense with Hyperdrive on a unit with 95 aim. The issue is that so frequently, the reason you're using Overdrive is to use Whistling Storm Cannon, and then to Reckoning somewhere, and then to shoot, and Adaptive Aim doesn't do anything with the... Like, it's very easy to play around not having this, so that's why this is able to be cold. But it's still thematically appropriate. On the subject of being too tanky at lower levels, I also think Combat Repair just heals too much at lower tiers. I think this should be 5-7-9 instead of 7-8-9. In the early game, being able to heal 14 hit points over the course of a mission is just absolutely fucking outrageous. Like, let's be honest, even healing 10 is nuts. That's more healing than you expect your medic to do in the entire mission, even if they do end up in a nightmare scenario where they have to use all of their medkits, right? Combat Repair is, frankly, like, perfectly fine in the late game, but in the early game, it's just too strong. And on the subject of stuff that is in the early game specifically a little bit weird, if we go down to the P1 Disruptor, the fact you can't upgrade this one, but the P2 Disruptor gets 2 upgrade slots, and the P3 Disruptor gets 3 upgrade slots. That feels very weird to me. I don't see a reason that it should be that way. Like, in terms of balance concerns, I really don't see anything that this makes less strong about the level 1, but it's very unintuitive that the first one is at 0 instead of 1. It's not... Like, I will suggest some things in this video that are buffs for Proxians, because my feedback's not just that they're too strong. There are some ways they should be stronger, and they aren't, and this is one of them. Admittedly, most of them are very minor things like this, but this is not exclusively a nerf Proxians video. This is a how I think their design can be improved video. And before we start really diving into the perk tree too much more, I do want to say I'm not convinced this class should have access to a PCS at all. The dodge PCS for taking feels absolutely insanely valuable, going up from 30% to like 50-something% with the PCS for dodge. What I was doing where I was using the mobility PCS to essentially nullify their base mobility problems and do stuff like overdrive and then triple action reckoning to move like across the entire map and then have 2 actions left, right? I think mobility and dodge in particular stand out as being really strong in this class, like disproportionately stronger than a PCS is anywhere else. And the class is already so strong without them. I think that it helps keep that mobility weakness for them, and I think that it helps keep them in line to just not allow them to have a PCS, just like you wouldn't allow a Spark to have a PCS. Getting into the tree for the class, I'm going to quickly rebuild this, because I want to demonstrate something. Just gonna buy down the line, it doesn't matter. The first thing I want to talk about is not any specific ability, but a problem that Proxians have that affects other soldiers just as much as it affects them. If you look at Hyperdrive, it costs 10 AP for the first line, and it's 11 for the second line, 12 for the third line, so on and so forth, 15 at the final line. If we were to come over to another soldier, oh, that's actually a problem. Apparently that is how the baseline units work if you're playing with vanilla classes. That is the way the AP costs are balanced. Huh. Well, I don't have proficiency classes available, so this bit of feedback might not be as important. But it does matter if you're designing a class mod, how it interacts with other class mods. So, considering I'm a proficiency class back guy and Proxians are fundamentally not for me, this matters a lot less. However, For class packs like PCP that have ability cost balance at 15 at the first rank up to 25 by the highest rank, somebody with PCP would probably only have good reason to spend their AP on a Proxian. You'd be getting better abilities that do more by spending less ability points. Now, realistically, because baseline classes are actually balanced on this same scale, this critique probably doesn't matter. Anyone who's playing with PCP and Proxians at the same time fundamentally has a conflict of design in their mod order, so since it's in line with base classes, that doesn't matter. However, it is worth pointing out, in case this is intended to be used alongside other mod classes that have PCP's AP balance, I don't know what non-vanilla mod-added classes tend to look like. I have no idea, for instance, with Long War the Chosen classes or other mod packs, how they tend to look, but I would make sure that most people playing with this are seeing similar AP costs between units. Because just like with Sparks, if it's going on every mission and it has a great ability to buy, you should always buy that before you buy anything on anyone else, because it will see more missions and do more work. But apparently that's not really super important. There is an argument to be made that because it goes on every mission, it should have more expensive ability points. I assume the baseline vanilla Spark doesn't do that, and I'm not about to build one to check. But that is a real balance argument that if a unit can see use on every mission, spending AP on it is more valuable and its abilities should cost more. But I'm not going to delve into that there. Having put forth the idea is enough. I'm not here to design the class. That's not what I'm doing. I'm here to give my feedback on how it feels and what stood out to me as the strongest and the weakest. So I guess let's just start with the strongest. Let's talk about the Whistling Storm Cannon. For the vast majority of the campaign, this just said they're dead. Whatever this hit was removed from the map, and the only thing that didn't apply to was Chosens. They would die on the next hit. I don't know if it's possible to make the Whistling Storm Cannon scale with weapon tier. And even moving it back to Colonel wouldn't really solve the problem, because I had Colonels like, what, by June? However, Whistling Storm Cannon in its current state, with its massive AoE, with its 2 uses, is just incredibly strong. I can't see its damage here, unfortunately, but I can find it. I just need to go to loadout. Go over to loadout on somebody who actually has the ability, I guess. So the Whistling Storm Cannon dealing 10 to 11 is fine. Critical damage plus 2, armor pierce 2, shred 3, rupture 1, clip size 2, range 12, radius 17. I think the things that stand out to me on this are, 1, the rupture is wholly gratuitous. You probably should just cut that. Like, if you hit something with this, it's going to die relatively easily. I think the rupture is making this, like, lieutenant ability do better against sectopods and almost nothing else. This ability is nuts. If you use it against a sectopod, it still did great work. I think the rupture is entirely gratuitous. It's already overpowered as it is. I would probably like to see it brought down. This might be, like, controversial. Should it be brought down all the way to 7 to 8 so that it doesn't one-shot mutons? And like in a modded campaign, the math gets different, right? Because there are so many different health values. But my concern is that this was just killing so much for so long outright on its own. Mutons have 2 armor, right? I think I would like to see it kept the way it currently is, just with the rupture and the armor pierce removed. Because then it would no longer guaranteed one-shot a muton. It would be rolling to kill them, at least. This just deals so much damage, and the fact you get 2 uses of it, in addition to its incredibly generous AoE. Like, combine this with teleport or with repositioning on Reckoning, and we are going to talk at length about Reckoning, because that is the other major offender. But Whistling Storm's massive damage, its massive radius, its armor pierce and rupture, it deals just enough to one-shot almost every enemy for the first 15 force levels of the game. It's only when you get to tier 3 that it stops one-shotting. It's still incredible, and in the base game, nothing scales to it, and that's less of a problem in modded campaigns, I know, but it's so strong for so long. Having it fall off more severely in the late game is not a problem. Like, this will already not one-shot the tier 3 muton elites from Long War the Chosen standalone, right? So it doesn't matter if you nerf it by 2 damage against them. It really matters if this is one-shotting mutons for most of the campaign, though. And I do genuinely think that this just needs a straight cut to its damage, and I think maybe the most elegant way to do that is to cut its armor pierce and to remove the rupture. Or even reduce its damage more than that and increase the rupture, right? Have it be more of a setup tool and less of a hard killing tool. But as it stands, it's so exceptionally good at killing that it just invalidates most of the campaign. And I'm going to talk about the weapons in a hot second, because I think it's worth talking about Reckoning first, because this is so critically important to how the weapons function. In a word, Reckoning is insane. It's absolutely nuts, and it is the main reason that the movement weakness of the Proxian doesn't really hold much water. Reckoning is a 1-turn cooldown, meaning you can use it once per turn, every turn, and it allows you to dash as a blue move, provided you're dashing to an enemy to attack them. And when you're doing this, it will be with a 100% chance to hit, standard damage weapon that deals 1 shred, which is a very, very, very strong ability. On something like a ranger, there might be some drawback to this, because you're a unit that would be in a dangerous position after doing it, but this is one of the tankiest units in the game. Effectively, this is not just one of the highest mobility abilities in the game, but it's also the strongest form of Marauder in the entire game, right? This pretty much guarantees that you take a 100% chance shredding attack as your first move, followed by a guaranteed flanking attack with your second move using your Proxian hand cannon. So, coming to the P3 Disruptor, it is intentionally a bad weapon. It deals 4 to 6 damage at max tier, and while it does pierce armor, which I think is appropriate and a good way for it to scale without becoming too strong, its increased aim means it's almost a guaranteed hit even without the guaranteed flank shots, right? When you run up to something, even if it's got like 30 defense, this guy's just going to hit it guaranteed every time between the short range bonuses, etc. Additionally, this weapon has no max range where it falls off, and I find that kind of alarming. I'm not sure it needs to be that reliable at max range. It's just another way the unit is very strong in every capacity. Like, as an all-rounder, the only thing this unit's not great at is standing still and firing repeatedly turn after turn. It excels in every other category aside from team support, but as this campaign is evidence for, what team do you need to support? The Proxian's enough on its own. So I do like that the P3 Disruptor is designed to be a weak but accurate gun to complement the blade, that the character is very clearly built around using this as its main weapon, and this is really the secondary weapon. However, thanks to Exterminator, this unit deals +2 bonus when attacking injured enemies, like the one you just stabbed, meaning it's now back up to full rifle damage. And yeah, sure, it's up against absolutely crazy stuff. I need to talk about Nano Contract in a second, and Whistling Storm Cannon, but ability points exist, and as I said earlier, this unit goes on every mission. There's no reason to spend ability points on anything else before this unit, and flat +2 damage, not quite flat +2 damage, but pretty close to flat +2 damage on its main gun is a very, very good buy, even if I forgot to buy it on my second proxy in all campaign, so clearly they don't really need it. I've started to ramble a little bit, but the point is that even though the gun is designed to be weak, and it's meant to be used alongside Reckoning and not as a standalone gun, Reckoning is still, combined with that gun, the best, most consistent, reliable form of Marauder in the entire game. The minimum you should expect out of a proxy in every turn is to land a slash followed by a hand cannon shot. And there's no other unit in the game that can say the minimum you expect from squaddy rank on is to land 2 attacks per turn, and that's the bottom of what the class can do. And for me, I think the only real solution to this is to increase the cooldown on Reckoning, which is very weird because this is the only way for you to melee attack that doesn't have a cooldown right now. So I think what I'd suggest is increasing this to a 3-turn cooldown and giving it a normal yellow action dashing slash like the Rangers have already. If this is not at least a 3-turn cooldown, the mobility of the unit and the insane consistency doesn't drop. Because what you'll see is you'll see Reckoning turn 1 followed by just shooting them or something. And then on the second turn, you'll see like blue move shoot something that's already had its cover cleared by someone else, followed by Whistling Storm Cannon, or you'll see like Overdrive, Taser Blades, which are hiding from me, there they are, followed by a Storm Cannon, followed by a shot, and then on the third turn, Reckoning is back, right? Because of its ability to combo with Overdrive and just have 3 consecutive turns of maximum output, I really do think Reckoning should be a 3-turn cooldown, and they should have a standard Ranger-style slash in addition to Reckoning. I don't think the fundamental insane action economy of this class will ever be stopped without putting a 3-turn cooldown on Reckoning. This one's less offensive. Fundamentally, it's not offensive. When you're using this, you're not doing anything. So this staying at 2 turns is really not a problem. But I do wonder if Teleport itself should be a 3-turn cooldown. And to some degree, that comes into balancing with Teleport Shockwave. If they're both 3-turn cooldowns, it starts being easier to justify Shockwave. And if you push it to 4, it starts being even harder to justify Shockwave. So Teleport's something I have my eye on as potentially being too strong, but it's not the problem with mobility. The problem is Reckoning. The problem is Reckoning with a mobility PCS, and especially with that and Hyperdrive. But using it with hyperdrive is really not the main issue. The issue is using it every single turn for the entire campaign. I think it's fair to say that despite their base 10 mobility, I have never played with a more mobile soldier than Proxians. Like, I reworked skirmishers to be mobile and super offensive in my last campaign. Way less mobile than this. It's not even close. And one last note about Reckoning. The fact that Missile Barrage and Hyperdrive don't seem that insane are because of Reckoning, right? Like the ability to, for instance, use a Whistling Storm Cannon, well, they'd all be dead. So let's say Shock Missiles instead, and then Taser Blades in, and then Fan Fire is really, really strong. Hyperdrive's a really strong ability, but it just matters less because you can Reckoning in and then Fan Fire. You can Reckoning in and then Whistling Storm. You're basically just getting one action for this. Whereas with baseline Sparks, you would do something like Hyperdrive. Well, it's Overdrive for them. My brain can't handle this. You would do something like Overdrive, Rocket, Shoot, Shoot. And normally you'd only get any one of those 3 actions in Hyperdrive. Overdrive would have been worth 2 actions instead of just the 1. So Hyperdrive, despite this being a much stronger class, is actually doing less work than Overdrive does because of Reckoning. Missile Barrage costing 2 actions to use is not actually that... Does it cost 2 actions to use, or is it a turn-ending action that costs 1, but requires 2 actions to use? I never actually tried to use this during Overdrive. It looks... Yeah, it's turn-ending and requires 2 actions to use. Okay. So the main reason Missile Barrage feels less good is because if you always have guaranteed 2 offensive actions going through, then Missile Barrage is hard to justify. And like, yeah, it'll blow up a bunch of cover, but you have 2 Whistling Storm Cannons, and that doesn't overwrite the 2 rockets you get either. So with 2 Whistling Storm Cannons and 2 rockets, who needs to spend 2 actions on this when I could be running in to get better positioning on those other abilities? A big part of the things that seem weak comparatively in this class all boil down to Reckoning. And on the subject of Reckoning making Hyperdrive look worse, I actually don't think Salvo and Total Combat should even be in this tree. Part of that's because Reckoning is a baseline action. You can already blue move and then throw these to tremendous effect. You don't actually need these abilities to have great turns where you use your explosives. But additionally, why would I spend 14 AP on this or 10 AP on this when I can instead spend 10 AP on Hyperdrive, which does the same thing for a turn, and with only 1 utility slot, that's basically mission accomplished. I mean, Salvo I see more argument for, because you get a lot of tools like Whistling Storms, and I don't know if it works on Shock Missiles, but definitely on rocket launchers. But Total Combat only works on grenades. So while Salvo I sort of see an argument for, Total Combat feels so incredibly redundant with Hyperdrive in the tree. And speaking of things in the AWC deck that I'm not quite the biggest fan of, I don't like tactical rigging being here. I've got it reworked, and it actually is not a problem if people are running the tactical rigging rework mod that I run. I forget its name. It probably comes up if you search that. But getting an extra item slot on this class means it no longer has to choose between blue screen rounds for insane offense, or whatever ammo type you want to argue for, and a powerful vest like a Bio Assault Vest, which would give you 2 more armor and be insane. Without tactical rigging, the class has to choose, no matter what perks you have, it will have to choose between insane offense and insane defense. Provided mod setups aren't messing that up, of course. But with tactical rigging, I'd actually argue it's the strongest AWC perk and one of the strongest perks period in the entire class, because not very many perks are as good as +2 armor or as good as +5 damage against robots, and that is essentially what tactical rigging is in this class. I think this is, even with the stuff like Death from Above and Lightning Reflexes down here, I think tactical rigging is unambiguously the strongest perk in the AWC deck and a severe outlier in power. And it doesn't show up here, but the kinetic plating perk they get from the Guerrilla Tactics Center, I really think the maximum armor on that should be reduced to like 10 or something. I don't know what it's currently set to. Part of the reason I even bought this ability was just to see how many pips of armor I got. It looked to me like this stacked, and if I had an untimed mission, I could sit there for like 40 turns and keep increasing the amount I had. I'm gonna go do a quick test of that real quick, 1 second. So very sincerely, I cannot tell how much health this has. 26 is my actual health. It's not counting the ablative health. This is the 18+8 from the base thing. And when I press this button, I can see that this pip goes up, that I'm getting more armor. But this number doesn't change. I have no idea how much health I have. I'm assuming that was 6, but it didn't look like 6 pips. It looked like 1. And if I read what this ability says, it seems weird that it would go up by that much, right? Which provides 2, 4, or 6 of damage absorbing ablative based on armor tier. So the first time I used this, I thought, oh, that must be going up to 6, but that would mean this is like 100 pips or something crazy. But it's not just going up to a max value, because if I press it again, you can see we're currently very clearly somewhere in the 2 pips range. It's gone up a little bit. I think that means I have like 16 ablative health right now. So this is a very clear abuse case. We're on untimed missions. The correct thing to do if a Proxian's on the mission is just to sit here, pressing end turn, until you physically can't lose and the Proxian can solo the mission on their own. And I think my health just ticked down somewhere in there. So after a short period of time, does it come back down? Yes. Okay. So that's good. It means you can't do the abuse case. However, I can't see a single reason to have this many pips of armor. Because I do genuinely think if this is about 10, that must be 100 maximum. I can't think of any reason that you'd ever have more than like 20, right? Even if you were at full ablative, use the shield boost, and then you got like multiple missed shots against you. 20 would still be this much, and it seems like far too many to me. I think 10 to 20 should be what this is set to. Right now, it's unreadable. I have no idea how much it has, and until I sat down to test this after playing with it for most of the campaign, I had no idea there was a cooldown to it, because it's so hard to see that it's even changing. A couple more notes left in my notepad before I start just going through my head and seeing if anything stands out to me that I should mention in this video. One of which is this soldier is able to guaranteed kill a sectopod on its own, which is insane to me. Because it can just use Reckoning, run in, get in melee range, hit it, shred it a little bit, use Overdrive, Whistling Storm Cannon, Blue Screen Fanfire. And that is a guaranteed kill on a sectopod or a gatekeeper, or any equivalent enemy, unless you've gone out of your way to nerf the rounds or increase their health dramatically. And even in those circumstances, it's still an absolutely tremendous amount of guaranteed output that I don't think any other soldier matches, right? Like, even Reapers need to find a way to make their Banish connect and aren't just throwing Blue Screen Banish at a full armor sectopod and assuming it'll die. You still tend to shred it first. So this soldier's offensive output is unironically just unmatched. The range of its AoE, the ability to use Blue Screen Fanfire in addition to that. I do think the maximum output would be reduced substantially without Proton Accelerator being here, but I don't actually think having Fanfire is a problem. The problem could be the aim, the problem could be being able to do it every turn with Reckoning, the problem could be the second charge of Whistling Storm Cannon with only a 1-turn cooldown, meaning you're very easily able to meter out your resources in a way where you always have access to this play. It's very hard to really run out of resources with this character. I think one change I would really like to see is Whistling Storm Cannon removing your 2 rockets. I didn't even realize I had them until relatively late in the campaign. I just assumed they had been replaced. I don't know how that's handled in a coding end, but to me, it seems like the Whistling Storm Cannon should remove the rockets. Having 2 additional rockets in addition to the Whistling Storm Cannon feels nuts to me. Like, I just can't run out of resources at that point, because I already have so many strong cooldown-based abilities. I'm not going to point to Whiplash, because that's my fault for running an overhaul, but still. Wait, did I run the overhaul? I thought I pointedly turned off that. Yeah, no, I did. I turned off Mitsurugi's Whiplash overhaul and my tweaks that adjusted. It would be relocalized if I had it. And I cleared my config before this mission. I actually don't know. Does this mod rework the Whiplash to not be cooldown based? Or sorry, to be cooldown based instead of charge based? Or did I mess something up? Either way, I don't think Whiplash is remotely problematic on this character, which says a lot about its power level that Whiplash is not standing out at all. The last note about power levels I have is that I genuinely think the default for this character should either be that it replaces a unit on Gatecrasher or that it's not on Gatecrasher. As my campaign shows, this character can solo Commander difficulty Gatecrasher with no difficulty. I think playing cautiously, you could easily solo a modded Legend Gatecrasher with the Proxian, and with an additional 8 units, one of which is a hero unit, it should be absolutely trivial. I don't think this character should be on Gatecrasher at all, but if it's going to be, I think it should absolutely be replacing a unit there. I think the default just makes Gatecrasher a complete walkover of a mission to such a degree that it's not an acceptable default. Now, 2 notes I have about bugs before I start digging through my head and seeing if there's anything I didn't bother to write down. One is that the electronic abilities like Tesla Beam and Shock Missile consistently had bad tooltips for me, where they would say like 12 to 15 and the highlight would say guaranteed dead, and then I would shoot something that had 10 or 11 health and it wouldn't die. I know this happened at numerous points with both of these abilities. I'm not sure what's causing it. I have no idea whatsoever, but that is a bug that I've experienced. And with misleading highlights, that feels like a thing a lot of stuff does in the base game, but the tooltip agrees with it is the problem. that you'll see 12 to 15 written on your screen, target someone with 10 or 11 health, and then they will live through it, and that just shouldn't be happening. When the highlight messes up, that's a UI thing that might not be this mod at all, but when the actual ability tooltip is wrong, that is incredibly dangerous, and that needs to be fixed. I have no idea what causes it, and for all I know, it could be a mod conflict on my end, but still, I need to mention that because it is a major issue with the class right now. And lastly, I saw some AI issues in this campaign that I've never seen in another campaign. I don't know if this was as a result of Proxians being there, but the Chosen just sort of freaked out and stopped after the first time I killed them. For all I know, they just saw that everyone had 4 armor and they couldn't deal damage, so they skipped their turns. I don't know. But it could also be something else, and it could be unrelated to Proxians. I need to mention it, though, because I do have some reason to believe that Proxians might be messing up the AI to some degree, and the reason I say this is because at some point in time, I used taser blades on a mech, which I thought meant its gun was unloaded. But that mech ran around for 2 turns doing nothing and then just stopped moving until I killed it, which is very strange and not what should be happening. Because if its gun is unloaded, surely it should shoot missiles or reload the gun, right? Like, I don't know what this is supposed to do, but I was clearly very wrong. I think that's also the only time I used taser blades in the whole campaign that didn't kill somebody or immediately get followed by killing that unit. So I don't actually know how repeatable that is or it was a one-off thing, but that did occur to me at least once. I do genuinely think one of my biggest pieces of thematic feedback for this class is that it's clearly intended to be a tanking class with this massive health and the armor just being so high. But for me, the fact that it doesn't really have an impactful tanking tree, right? Systemic stasis, like mine never even took 5 damage. Over the whole campaign, I never got more than 5 health missing. Even in the early missions where it was just 1 proxy and it was actually stressful, they never came close to triggering this ability. And Sacrifice is, like, obviously a very, very good ability, but there's really not a tanking tree. And for a class that's clearly intended to be a tank, I think that is a thematic failure. And that's one of the big reasons I think to remove the armor and put blast padding in is a great way to balance it and help build that thematic identity back into the class. I genuinely do think Hunter Protocol is just not super balanced for the character. It's going to land the shots more reliably than almost any other unit due to its massive base aim. And it just gives you a ton of random throughput damage on a character that was already incredible without being thematically related whatsoever. I genuinely don't know that Missile Barrage should be a turn-ending action. Being forced to do it as your first action, like Cloistered Shielding, for instance, obviously you don't have it be a free action like Cloistered Shielding, but that can make sense. But in a character with so many insane one-action tools, with so much that it can be doing on a given turn, spending your whole turn to do this, like the 1 or 2 times I used this, it was because it's a resource I didn't value that was good enough to solve a problem. I only ever use this to meter out resources. If I played this character again, I wouldn't buy this. I just bought it to see what it did. I'm not saying it should be buffed necessarily. I think it's probably a better attitude to have to nerf the rest of the class to become in line with this, or at least more in line with it. But right now, this feels like one of the weakest perks in the class. And even with tremendous balance changes, I think that will continue to be the case. A bit of information that I think could really do with being in the localization here is that this character, this should probably specify if this removes concealment or not. And I think Teleport should specify that it doesn't remove concealment. Because for me, one of the big reasons I never even considered Teleport Shockwave is when I picked up Teleport in my test campaign and saw it didn't break concealment, I just assumed the attacking one does. And that is very important to the decision making as to whether or not you should pick this up. Also, I have no idea how much damage this deals. That's an important thing for the tooltips on all of this. Shock missiles, no idea what it hits for. Tesla beam, same deal. Whistling storm cannon, you don't know until you buy it. So as a result, I think all of this localization, like, it does come with a lot of information, but it doesn't come with the most important information, which is like, what damage does it actually deal? That's very important. I had no idea you could use combat repair on an ally. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I just also think it's overkill. I think one way to help nerf the class is to make it fundamentally selfish and remove this part of it and just make it automatically use on self. I honestly don't know that you can use this on an ally. I feel like every time I click the button, it instantly triggered, implying I wasn't targeting it. It's possible that if there's only 1 damage robotic ally, which was usually the case at auto targets, I don't know. I had no idea this could target an ally, so it's either localized wrong or just unnecessary power that I don't think the character needs. Oh yeah, this is a big one. I completely forgot to mention this. Nano Construct. That is just bugged. This is supposed to be a Haywire clone, And if you take a look at all the times I successfully got enemy protocol and gained 60 hacker the course of the campaign, it would have been the same either way for me. However, it currently doesn't roll, it just takes control of the unit, which to me seems very, very wrong. That doesn't seem right at all. As it stands, the hack stat for this character is basically just for show. It's only for objectives. It doesn't do anything with the Haywire Protocol clone, and that's explicitly a bug. That was mentioned in a discussion on the mod page. That is not how it's supposed to work, and that is currently how it does work. Additionally, the specification of can only control normal-sized units, it's obvious what that means. You can't take sectopods. However, it's not actually accurate, even with base game units, because you can't take Andromedon shells. And personally, I think that you probably should be able to take Andromedon shells. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to if you can take the normal Advent mechs, and to some degree, that's just like an issue with the character, an issue with balancing the ability, right? Haywire Protocol being used on sectopods, but this isn't. It's a way of nerfing the ability, and I'm completely fine with that, but Andromedon shells, to me, with this description, doesn't work. It's not correct, right? I'm not sure how to phrase this better without making it work on Andromedon shells, and compared to the rest of the class, it is absolutely not a balance concern if this thing is stealing Andromedon shells. So I would just allow it to work on Andromedon shells, or figure out a way to word this differently that makes it clear it doesn't. Because for me, that was a major letdown of the ability and tremendously impacted how much use I got out of it. Also, the whole bugged and guaranteed control thing, that's totally fucked. At 3 uses per mission for Haywire, that's fine, because like PCP, Haywire is just a cooldown, who cares? 3 charges per mission of guaranteed mind control, absolutely game breaking. It should be like Haywire. And on that same boat, I'm assuming this is equivalent to a tech specialist plus tier 3 gremlin at Colonel rank. I will point out that means that as these guys hit Colonel way before you get access to tier 3 gear, their hack score is going to be at maximum compared to a tech specialist, like halfway into the game, way before a tech specialist hits it. There's not really a way around that unless you can tie hack to armor, I guess. If you can do that, I would recommend scaling this so that the armor gives plus hack. That's a little bit weird, but it would help avoid the problem of once you fix this, a Colonel always mind controls like the tier 1 mechs, because you will be seeing tier 1 mechs with Colonel Proxians. They go on every mission. They get to Colonel very quickly. So that's a thing. This hack should be equivalent to tech spec with tier 3 gremlin, and if it can be scaled by armor, I'd prefer it to work that way so that you don't get way ahead of them because they're limited by the tech tree and you aren't. I really like Exterminator. It's a great way of giving the character better offensive ability and a way of keeping the gun to, you know, keep pace with everything else. It's a great way of enabling Fanfire to actually deal relevant damage with your terrible gun, and it's at a point in the tree where it's against insanely powerful abilities that makes it an actual hard choice. My big issue with it is that the AP costs for this class are so low. Like, spending 13 AP or whatever it is for this, that's a non-issue. You always do that. This ability is easily worth 13 AP. There are very few things in the game that are going to be worth that, especially a few missions down the line once you get Proton Accelerator, which to me is the easiest choice in the world to pick. Although if I did have other characters and I cared about protecting them, which is clearly unnecessary, but if I did, it would compete with Sacrifice. But I think that because of the AP cost is the only reason I look at Exterminator and I feel worried. I really do like the ability. It's just that the AP costs in the class are so low that it becomes a balance concern when you have a bunch of stuff in the same tier that's all very powerful, because you can just buy all of it very easily. You know, something I never used because I don't think I rolled Death from Above and Saturation Fire on the same character. Saturation Fire plus Death from Above is absolutely wild. You overdrive Saturation Fire to clear their cover and soften them up, and then you just kill them all with Death from Above. That's terrifying. It's not a problem. AWC combo perks being ridiculous, especially on a class this strong, is not a big deal. Death from Above is always nuts. Saturation Fire is always nuts. I'm just rebuilding the character a few times right now to see if there's anything else in this list that I think is out of line. And that combo is funny, but it's not out of line in my opinion. It looks like there's not anything I'm forgetting. I really do think Blast Padding should be removed from this, and that a Blast Padding-esque perk should be added up here. Like, the easy way is just move Blast Padding into the tree. That's what I would do because I'm not actually a modder. I just make config changes. However, a more elaborate and unique tanking perk would probably be a better thing to actually put into this tree, and then Blast Padding staying down here would probably not be a problem. If the armor does not get nerfed, I think having an armor perk here, Blast Padding here, and the current armor numbers would be too much. They become unstoppable gods. Well, you know, more than they currently do even. And this has probably all been fairly rambling as it is a discussion video, but that's fine. I'm going to, while I edit this, put it all into a notepad and make it concise and post it to the modding Discord. Anyways, for now, I'm done. I'm rather coherent. I hope it was fun hearing me talk about this for those of you who aren't designing the mod, and for those who are, I hope it was helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully.